Today we're looking at your comments from our last Jean Grey video to find out what deaths actually count, if any, and also how does Wolverine survive starvation? That doesn't make sense. Let's get into it. So the very first comment that I want to address today comes from Zerule09, who said that I lost a lot of nerd cred. Shucks. When I said that Jean Grey was the Phoenix instead of apparently properly saying that she was possessed by the Phoenix, and this actually is not as clear-cut as you might think. It actually depends on who you ask in the comic book industry. Because the reason I was saying she was the Phoenix was simply because at that point in time she was going by the name Phoenix. So I was saying Phoenix did this because Jean Grey at the time was going by the name Phoenix, so it made sense to me. And again, you could argue that, well, it wasn't really Jean Grey, it was the Phoenix Force itself that was possessing her, so it wasn't her being called Phoenix, it was the Phoenix being called Phoenix. But this whole idea about whether Jean Grey and the Phoenix are separate entities or one and the same seems to be a point of contention at Marvel. So you remember the story I told in the last video about how the Shi'ar was holding Jean Grey accountable for her actions, destroying, billions upon billions of lives, and they fought on the moon and she sacrificed herself to save everybody? So the original idea behind that story was that Jean Grey was supposed to be depowered, not killed. They were going to take the Phoenix Force away from her. Again, pointing to this idea that Jean Grey is Phoenix. Even though at the time the writers John Byrne and Chris Claremont were like, I don't really agree with that direction, but okay, yeah, we'll do things your way. So to me, it almost seems like Marvel is trying to say that Jean Grey is the Phoenix and the Phoenix is Jean Grey, but they're also still separate somehow. It's confusing, I know, but what are you gonna do? Now, at the end of the video last week, I asked you guys to tell me which deaths you think count, because I was just listing some that people might consider deaths, not necessarily ones that are definitive deaths, and a lot of you guys had a bunch of stuff to say about it. So for starters, you remember how Jean Grey froze herself in a glacier at the end of Phoenix End song before, basically immediately coming back? SFtheGreat says, does that really count as a death? I mean, we've seen another prominent Marvel superhero be frozen in a glacier before and then being thawed out in the future. Did he die then? And that's a good point, but I will say that I've always read that as Steve Rogers having the super soldier serum allowed him to not die from all that freezing and actually preserved him, whereas it would have killed another person. But you could argue the same thing with Jean Grey being a mutant or having the Phoenix Force, whatever. I don't know, it's up to you. Lazygamer echoed a sentiment that a lot of you guys had, which is, if Jean Grey comes to life almost immediately, does it really count as a death then? And to that, I would confusingly say, yes, of course it does. Lazygamer uses this example of a smoker saying, I'm going to quit, but then they pick up smoking, almost immediately after. Can we say that that person actually quit smoking or just took a break from it? So in that same vein, can we really say that Jean Grey really died or just took a break from living? Which I actually do kind of like that idea. So if we use the same analogy and say that Jean Grey is a smoker who's trying to quit, and every time she dies actually counts as them having another cigarette, and then the breaks in between having a cigarette are her living again, are we supposed to then say that, alright, so the smoker didn't have a cigarette 2 days ago, they did have one yesterday, but they didn't have one today, so I guess that cigarette doesn't count because it was so close in between the times when they didn't have cigarettes. Of course that cigarette still counts. I don't know if I'm saying this wrong. To me, a death is a death no matter how long it lasts. Now, you could definitely say that her dying and then almost immediately coming back to life cheapens a death, but I don't think it means that the death doesn't count. But then, of course, because it's NerdSync and you guys are so brilliant and I love you, we had a lot of comments down there talking about what even is death. So we had dalli, who was talking about physicalism versus dualism, whether the human body is just the physical parts or whether we have a soul. And maybe Jean Grey really only died the first time and every other time has just been a carbon copy of her, not exactly the same, but similar enough to pass as Jean Grey. And this goes back to our whole thing about the ship of Theseus and C-3PO episode we did forever ago. It's so confusing and I love it. And then of course we had Supreme84X, who also chimed in about what the definition of death is or looks like, and arguing that Jean Grey has never died because she has never met any of these requirements. One thing I do want to clarify about this comment is that they were saying Wolverine stabbing her on the asteroid doesn't really count because she was just mortally wounded, not dead. And to me, it actually just depends on how you read that. It is left ambiguous, so we don't actually know if she died, but I know some people read it as Wolverine just snapping her spine, instantly killing her just then with his claws, so could be death. I'm gonna give both of you guys, Nicholas and Supreme84, I'm gonna give you the NerdSync No Prize this week. You have earned it. It's also been way too long since I've given one of those out, so congrats, guys. But let's continue talking about Wolverine for a second, because in the video I kind of made a side comment about how in that same story it was revealed that Wolverine can survive starvation by slicing bits off of his arm and then eating that, and then regenerating it again and doing the whole process over again. I was very confused by how this worked, and I couldn't really figure it out scientifically, so a couple of you guys chimed in with some great answers. Logan48227 kind of points out that it's very similar to Bloodshot. They don't specifically say Bloodshot. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it does sound a lot like Bloodshot, needing protein in order to use his healing factor, and so he's just slicing. He's like basically recycling protein through his body by cutting it off and whatever. Bloodshot, by the way, is a Valiant Comics character who also has a similar healing factor, although his is more based on nanobites instead of a mutant ability, but he does need a ton of protein in order to maintain that healing. Also, we made a video about him right here. Again, though, I'm not entirely sure if this process of eating protein and then recycling that same protein to be re-eaten over and over again would even work. But Lawrence Riederer says, well, okay, what if Wolverine's cells were actually miniature fusion reactors? They can just make energy and matter by manipulating atoms and particles anywhere. And they're powered by microscopic interdimensional Wolverines running on hamster wheels inside of his cells. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna go ahead and accept that into my headcanon. Thank you so much to everyone who commented on that video last week. Such a fun discussion over there. Lots of great stuff. If you want to contribute to it yourself, links, as always, are in the description down below to not just the video, but the comments themselves, if you want to go to a very specific thread and add your own 2 cents. Lastly, I just want to touch on the NerdSync newsletter, the Sunday Sync Up, which came out yesterday. Super exciting, amazing response from you guys so far. We already have over 1,000 people signed up, which is mind-boggling. But I do want to clear up something. So we had some technical difficulties with our MailChimp not really working exactly as expected, so I'm going to spare you the details, but what that meant is I had to manually type in about 80 of your guys' email addresses, and I'm almost positive that because I was doing this the human old-fashioned way, I made some errors. So if you haven't received the NerdSync newsletter yet, it probably means that I or MailChimp screwed up, and I apologize for that. The good news is we're going to be releasing our next one in 2 weeks' time, so look forward to that. And if you didn't know we had a newsletter, hey, now you know we have a newsletter. You can go to nerdsyncnews.com and sign up right now. It's absolutely free. I keep forgetting to tell people that. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a thing. It's just a fun way for us to tell you more about the stuff we're working on every week. Every other week, rather. This is getting confusing. So with that said, I think I'm going to end this video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday for another episode of Comic Misconceptions. See ya.